Hello, hello. My name is Ethan Hunt, and I'm going to give you a quick overview of the economy and kind of how it works in relation to GDP. So, starting off here, where is my laser pointer? Starting off here, we've got two major parties. We've got households and we've got firms. And what happens is they contribute to two markets, a factor market and a goods market. And I will explain how. So, households, your daily average person is going to go into the market, into the goods market. Actually, I'll make that yellow. They're going to go into the goods market and they're going to buy goods, your household goods like combs, like food, like clothing, those sort of necessities, and they're going to provide that money to firms. So we're going to call this C for consumption expenditure. Basically, your normal goods and services. So perfect. That's going to go to the firms here. The firms, what they're going to do is they're going to take that money and they are going to, oh, that's a terrible arrow. They are going to go and take that money and put it into the factor market, and they're going to use the money to buy factors. And you remember those factors include land, capital, labor. So what they're essentially going to do is they're going to pay the households for their labor, for their land, for all the factors that they're able to provide. And as you can see, this provides a bit of a cycle. So households will buy the goods from the goods market, from the firms, and the firms will then use that money they receive to buy factors from the households, and that cycle continues and continues. And if we'd like to be more specific, this green arrow would be income, or in other words, Y. So, in GDP, or looking at an economy as a whole, we can kind of come up for a definition of GDP, and that is GDP. I'll write it up here. Is equal to aggregate expenditure, which is equal to aggregate income, which is equal to aggregate production. And that makes sense. So you can see that the money flowing in this economy is the same amount. It doesn't change. So let's say that we have $100 right over here, and you're going to go buy $100 worth of goods. So you're going to go to the goods market. You're going to spend your $100 on shoes, for example. You're going to spend it at Nike. And Nike is going to take that money and they're going to hire people, maybe graphic designers, maybe marketers, maybe salespeople, to then sell the shoes. And that $100 is going to go back to the household. So it's a bit of a cycle, that $100 going around and around. And GDP is the amount of money that's going around this cycle, essentially, in one word, in one way to say it. And you can see that let me bring the $100 back. You can see that the aggregate expenditure, the amount the households spend, is going to be equal to the amount that they're going to get back in income, because that cycle never breaks. Well, not yet. We'll go into how it breaks. So essentially, this is a very basic model of the economy. And I guess I can also just say this is also equal to our Y up here. And I'm going to label all these as well, because we're going to talk about maybe some other different arrows that could affect this economy, because this is pretty simple. So let's also think about firms. So if I'm Nike, for example, if I'd like to maybe expand my business, if we're kind of continue using that example, I might buy some more, fancy computers, or maybe for my graphic designers, maybe buy some better shoe presses or things like that. What that's called is investment. So Nike's going to go into the goods market, investment, and buy things from the goods market, which is going to contribute back to their firm. So now, not only is consumption expenditure, the only thing from the goods market, and now we're talking about investment by firms. Another thing to keep in mind is that, and you know what, while we're doing this, let's right up here, I guess, we'll do, not only is this true up here, but we can also start deducting this. The GDP, the amount of money going through this cycle, well, it was first before the blue here was equal to C. It's just whatever the household spent, and the firm would spend or pay it back to the factor market. But now we're also considering investment as well. Investment is another thing that's adding money, or that is going to contribute to the cycle of money within this GDP cycle. Great. Another thing to keep in mind is the governments. We're going to draw the government down here, which is going to be a spiky building. This is Parliament Hall. Perfect. So this is the government. And what the government is going to do is they are going to provide government expenditure, which it could be in the form of subsidies, tax breaks. Essentially, they're putting money into the goods market. So, for example, if you're a farmer, you might get a subsidy to grow potatoes. So the government will give you money to help the goods market produce more potatoes or whatever good or service the government wants to make. So that money is going to go into the goods market. And the farmer, for example, in this case, or if we're using Nike, maybe the government wants shoes for the military. They're going to spend some of this money, spend some of these resources, put it in the goods market, and the firms will use that. So this is going to be G for government expenditure. And going back to our equation up here, we can now add G. So G, not only is this cycle influenced by consumer expenditure, investment, but now it's also influenced by government expenditure. Wonderful. The last thing we have to worry about is the rest of the world. So right around in this corner, we're going to draw a globe, very very accurate, something like this, a globe. So this is the rest of the world. I'm going to write this in green. Rest of the world. So the rest of the world, what they're going to do is they're going to do two things. They're going to import and they're going to export. Export means the rest of the world is buying goods off this economy, this cycle. In this case, consider this Canada. They're going to buy goods from Canada. Importing is Canada is buying goods from this economy. So, let's first talk about exporting. So exporting, we'll use pink, excuse me, is the rest of the world putting money into the goods market. So that is, exporting is the rest of the world buying goods and services from our factor market, which puts resources in this cycle. So that is another thing we have to consider. So X for exporting. Great. And then again, at this upward equation here, not only is GDP dependent on consumption expenditure, investment, government expenditure, but now the amount of exports influences the amount of money flowing in the cycle. But again, let's remember that last bit there. We are going to talk about imports. What color should I use for imports? I will use teal. So imports, you can kind of think of it as a little bit bad for the money flow in this cycle here, because what a Canadian is doing in this example is they are buying goods from China, Mexico, America. They are taking money out of this cycle. So the household here, and I'm going to draw a bit of a liberally loose arrow, goes around here. The household is going to import goods, M for import, which, as you can see, goes outside of this. It's a leakage, if you will, that leaks out of this cycle and will go to the rest of the world. So instead of adding it in GDP up here, we're going to subtract it. And as you can see, this is how we derive the formula for GDP, because GDP is basically the sum of all the parts of this cycle. That is consumer expenditure, investment, government expenditure, exports, and imports. And while we're on this topic, I would like to maybe cover leakages and injections and how this factors into the cycle of the money cycle here of GDP. So, like I've mentioned, this is a cycle. So there's $100. Again, let me write this out here. There's $100, say, that a household has, and they're going to spend on, burgers from McDonald's. And the McDonald's is going to hire employees. They're going to hire farmers to make the food, and that's going to go back to the household. So again, there's this cycle here of this $100 going through, and in this case, $100 would be the GDP. However, there are some things that are taking money out of this $100, so leakages, and there's some things that are adding money to this $100, so injections. So let's talk about those. So in the previous section, we already kind of covered one leakage and one injection, and that is imports and exports. So like I've mentioned, an export is the rest of the world putting money into the goods market. They are buying things from the home economy, in this case, maybe Canada or America, and they are putting money into this cycle. So an injection, one example, would be exports. So at the top here, we will use pink. Oh, an injection would be exports. Okay. And similarly, on the flip side of that, and leakage would be imports. There's that $100 going through, but if a household decides not to spend that money in the Canadian goods market or the home goods market, the domestic goods market, I should say, that is money going out to the rest of the world. So that is a leakage. So M for imports is a leakage. And you can see I'm writing all these variables up top to show you the relationship that I will further explain. Great. Another example of a leakage. Yeah, so another example actually of a injection I should talk about first that we did talk a little bit about is government expenditure. So that's the government, coming out of nowhere and putting money into the goods market, whether it be through subsidies, tax breaks, something like that. So another injection in this case would be G. All right, that is, government expenditure. But similarly, on the flip side of that, a leakage in this case would be tax. So looking at the top side here, we've got our income, but every April you've got to pay income tax. So maybe draw an arrow off this. And this is going to be T for tax. So the government's going to tax you on your income on your buying decisions in the factor market. So it's going to take money out of this cycle. So this is plus T. All right. Lastly, the last leakage and injection we're going to talk about is from the loanable funds market. So in the middle of this economy is the Canadian banking system, or the domestic banking system. So CBS. All right. So if a household, for example, doesn't want to spend their money on Nikes or hamburgers or something, they want to put it in the bank. That's an option. And what that's going to do is that's going to, let me use pink, sure. That's going to increase the savings, or S, because while it might be good for a household, it takes money out of this cycle. So therefore it's going to be a leakage. And what you can get further, this is a further economics lesson that I won't touch too much on, but then what the firms can do is that they can take these savings, S for savings, and use it in the loanable funds market. But what you need to know is first, another example of a leakage would be savings, okay, S for savings. But consequently, the following, I guess the related injection would be investment. So the household will save money in the Canadian banking system. The firms will then use that money to invest back into the goods market. So that's another injection. So we're going to draw an eye up here. Perfect. So we've got our 3 leakages and we've got our 3 injections. That is imports, taxes, savings as leakages, and exports, government expenditures, and investments by firms as our injections. Now you may be wondering, why are these 2 equal? Well, we have stated in the previous section that GDP is equal to our aggregate expenditure, which is equal to our aggregate income, which is equal to our aggregate production, which is equal to our income. Essentially what that means is that in the end, the $100, let me draw that $100 again. that $100, let's make this a bill, $100 floating through the system here is always going to try and be $100. Because even if, since what we're saying with what we're saying with this above formula is that the money flowing through this economy should theoretically be the same. So it always should be $100. And if one of these leakages goes up, so say we import a lot more, we should also consequently have one of these injections. If we import more, maybe we're also exporting more, trying to, increase our trade as a country. So the idea is that since this is true, since GDP and aggregate expenditure is equal to aggregate income, this side of the economy is equal to this side of the economy, the leakage is an injection should be equal.